How's everybody doing? A good Vach Shavua Tov, a good week to you. How wonderful to start the week learning together. Wait, let me just button my button. Let's light up the darkness. I have an amazing story I'm going to share with you in 1 minute. Who's in the house? Sharon in New Jersey, Joe in the Inland Empire, Heidi in Australia. Welcome, Heidi. Carla in Brazil, Bill in mid-Missouri, Ryan in Jacksonville, Shandor in the Bronx, Belle in Texas, Sue Strauss in the house from Chicago, Steven in the house, Bella in Florida, and Sharon, I'm not going to read the whole comment, but talking about one of Nina's hero articles. We love those stories. Aoife in Florida, Ella says Shalom, Frank in San Pedro, Marjorie in the house, welcome everybody. Heard a great story by Shalosh Sudas, our third meal at our show this evening from Rabbi Weiss. I think Moshe Weiss visiting from Lakewood, New Jersey. And this story is about a car thief. A story about a car thief in Israel. He was quite a clever car thief. He was not only good at stealing cars, he didn't, overextend himself. He made a nice living stealing about 3 cars a week. He didn't try to overdo it. He didn't try to get rich on it. He just made a nice living stealing 3 cars a week. He's very good at it. So one time he gets to a parking lot. He sees a Mercedes, a few seconds he's in the car. A few more seconds he hot wires the car. Boom. He's rolling down the highway. And then he hears, he looks around. There's a baby in this car that he stole. What's he gonna do? Takes another look at the baby. The baby is kind of green. The baby looks like it's in very bad shape. In fact, it's a very hot day. He's a yid. He's a decent guy at heart. What does he do? Drives straight to the hospital, takes the baby inside. The emergency room people take the baby. The baby really was on death's door. He saved the baby. He's got some time to think about this. He doesn't just drop off the baby and run. He's handed over the baby and now he's in that hospital. Doctors come out and they say, you saved that baby's life. And, he says, yeah, so what happened? Tell us what happened. And police had been notified because, baby was left in the car. He says, yeah, I was walking by the car. I saw the baby. I'm pretty handy. I was able to get the car started. I drove straight to the hospital to save the baby's life. And meanwhile, the parents who were frantic, looking for the baby, they got the word the baby was at the hospital. They come running into the hospital. Our hero! The doctors, the parents, passers-by, reporters, everyone is hailing this guy who was walking by the car and saw the baby in distress and saved the baby's life. This guy, he just wants to crawl away. He doesn't really want to be kept getting told that he's a hero. The parents are insistent. You have to come. We want to give you a reward. Where do you want to go? We'll send you full expenses paid vacation. No, I don't want anything. I don't want anything. No, take something. No, I don't want anything. The parents insist. So finally he accepts to come to the parents' house for dinner. What dinner? A Shabbos dinner, right? They're religious people. So he goes and has a Shabbos dinner with them, but it's not just the parents at the house. All the neighbors come and they want to see the hero who saved the baby. This guy inside, he's dying that people calling him a hero when he stole a car and happened to save a baby. The people said, you got to come to our synagogue tomorrow. The rabbi wants to honor you. You got to come. I mean, this guy's now being swept along in these events of playing the part of the hero. He goes to the synagogue. Everyone's telling him what a hero he is. He's just feeling inside like, ugh. And then, the parents who really want to do something for him and he won't accept any gift, finally say, listen, we arranged something special for you. There's a tzaddik. Right? So a righteous, one of the great rabbis of the generation who happens to be visiting that town on that particular Shabbos, and people go to him to get a blessing. Well, the father has explained to that rabbi's assistant, what's going on with the hero, and they're going to fit the hero into the schedule of this great tzaddik. So the guy's like, oh, God. Can't get out of it. Okay, he goes and he meets the tzaddik, and he's thinking, this. It's funny. I mean, he's a thief, but he has this kind of inner faith, and he's thinking to himself, now that I'm going to meet a tzaddik, this real holy man of God, he's going to see right through me. He's going to know, and he can't take it anymore. He comes inside, gets the private meeting with the tzaddik. The tzaddik just starts to welcome him and says, listen, I'm just going to tell you, I stole the car. I stole the car. And that's why I was in the car with the baby in it. And then I saw there was a baby. I took it to the hospital. I'm no kind of hero. And the tzaddik says, I knew you were a great man. I didn't realize how great you are. I'm a kind of well-known rabbi. I read a lot of Torah. I travel around. I try to give people inspiration. But I've never merited to save a life, let alone a baby's life, a baby who has his whole future before him that would have been gone but for your action. You are a great man. Now, what I would like to know, says the tzaddik, is what did you do to merit this opportunity? The car thief, what did I do? I'm a thief. And the tzaddik says, no, think about it. Think carefully. Did you do something that was good and righteous? And the guy thinks to himself, when I steal cars, I always look inside the glove compartment. And if the people don't have insurance, then I don't steal the car. I only steal from people that have insurance and will have the car replaced. And the tzaddik said, that's it. That's it. That little kindness that you do, even within your lowly profession, gave you the merit to have this opportunity. We never know. You never know. You never know. Right? What's that little kindness that you can take upon yourself to do for the sake of others, and what the rolling repercussions of that might be in your life, in your future, in the lives of others. He talked, quite a bit more, but what he was talking about is that in this difficult time, where our brothers and sisters in Israel are really threatened, are really in danger, and not only that, Jews around the world are endangered. I just read after Shabbos that a Jewish woman in Paris was stabbed in a hate crime. There's some massive protests at the White House that almost broke through the gates of the White House. These are dangerous times. And in these times, to take upon yourself, a small thing. He told another story, I'll just summarize it, but it was about a non-religious man in Israel who, he's just not religious. He wasn't going to take on anything. But, I don't know who it was. Somebody in his life just said, take on something. Just take on something to live like a Jew. And what ended up coming up, they kind of like opened the book almost at random, a law book. It was how a Jew puts on his shoes in the morning. You know, that you put on your right shoe and then your left shoe, and then you tie your left shoe, and then you tie your right shoe. Did you know that's how a Jew puts on his shoes in the morning? And this guy said, okay, that I can do. I'll do that. You know, and his host had wanted more, like he would keep Shabbos, put on tefillin every day. But okay, he's going to put on his shoes like a Jew. He was a soldier in the army. One of the mornings the sirens went up, they had to go running. He just put on his shoes. He realized he didn't put on his shoes the way he had accepted upon himself to keep putting on his shoes. So he got out of, the first Humvee that he was going to ride in so he could fix his shoes, even though he was going to get in trouble, probably be late for his sergeant. But he retied his shoes the way that he's supposed to do. So he ended up in the second Humvee in the convoy. So the first one, as you can imagine, ran over an IED, was blown up. Everyone inside it died, and he would have died, but he tied his shoes. You never know. You never know. But this is a time when all of us could accept upon ourselves some practice, some extra, something you weren't doing before. If you don't know, if it doesn't come to your mind what that practice should be, just keep asking the question, what shall I take on now that I wasn't doing before? What mitzvah can I do a little bit more stringently, a little bit more beautifully, a little bit more rigorously? What have I not been doing that I've been thinking about doing? What regular practice am I going to take on at this time for the sake of peace in Israel, for the sake of the safety of the soldiers, for the sake of the healing of them or of someone in your life? When you take on something like that, it's very spiritually powerful. Okay, let's get to it. Our daf is page 78. We're running a few pages behind. Are you having Bava Kama envy? The rest of the world in Daf Yomi has opened the new tractate, the next tractate, Bava Kama. We've still got 4 pages to go, but we'll get there with God's help. So are we going to pick this up at the bottom of page 77b. Our daf tonight is 78, and we are working our way through Mishna number 4 here in chapter 4 of Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. Rav Papa said to Abaye, in the case of an Israelite who engages in intercourse with his sister, this makes her a zona. Right? So because she participated in incest, that makes her a zona. Whether she had a child by that or not, the fact that she did that sin makes her a zona, which means she's disqualified from marrying into the priesthood. Right? A priest cannot marry her. The fact that she committed that deed does not, mean that she can't marry other Jews, even Levites, but she can't marry a priest, okay? So this makes her a zona, and she's forbidden to marry a priest. But does this act, right, of a regular Yisrael sleeping with his sister, does that also make her a halala? So that a priest who engages in intercourse with her is liable for the prohibition of engaging in intercourse with a halala as well as with a zona, right? So it would be 2 different prohibitions. Is it that if he sleeps with her, he has violated 1 prohibition or 2? So this takes us back to the question we were examining a couple days ago. Can a prohibition take effect where another prohibition already exists? So the 2 sides of the question are like this. Do we say that this kal v'chomer inference, if she becomes a halala by engaging in sexual intercourse for which she is liable for violating only an ordinary prohibition, like a divorced woman who marries a priest or sleeps with a priest, this makes her a halala who's going to be prohibited to other priests. That doesn't make her a zona, right? It just makes her a halala. So can the prohibition? So that's for violating just a regular prohibition. Whereas the one who committed incest, that's a prohibition to severe prohibition, punishable by kares, death at the hands of the heavenly court. Right, so if she becomes a halala by engaging in sexual intercourse for which she is liable for violating only an ordinary prohibition, should she not all the more so be considered a halala by engaging in intercourse for which she is liable to be punished by kares, when she became a zona? Or perhaps the status of halala results only from a prohibition addressed specifically to the priesthood. Abaye said to him, a prohibition with regard to a halala results only from a prohibition addressed specifically to the priesthood. And from that alone, right, she becomes a halala if she was divorced, which is no prohibition at all, but then she slept with a priest. That's what makes her a halala. The fact that she slept with her brother, who's a Yisrael, makes her a zona because she violated a prohibition that's a prohibition on all Jews. No Jew is allowed to commit incest. No, in fact, no person is allowed to commit incest. That's one of the Noahide laws. But let's continue. Rava says, from where is this matter that the sages state that a halala, right, becoming a halala results only from a prohibition addressed specifically to the priesthood? The term halal or halala refers to prohibitions that have been violated involving priests. We've said that over and over again, but how do we know that? Where do we derive this? As it is taught in a Baraisa, the verse need not explicitly state that a divorcee is forbidden to a high priest. Don't we know that a divorced woman is forbidden to a common priest, a regular priest? Isn't it, knowing that, does it even need to be stated that she's also prohibited to a high priest? But the Torah states both prohibitions. She's prohibited. A regular priest cannot marry a divorced woman, and a high priest cannot marry a divorced woman. So from the fact that the Torah goes out of its way to state it in both cases, we learn something. The verse need not explicitly state that a divorced woman is forbidden to a high priest, and one could derive it by means of a kal v'chomer inference from the law of a common priest. As I can state the following argument. Now that a divorced woman is forbidden to a common priest, is it necessary to state that she is forbidden to a high priest? But if it is not necessary to mention it, why is the prohibition with regard to a divorced woman marrying a high priest stated in the Torah? Why? It is in order to teach the following. Just as the prohibition with regard to a divorced woman is distinct from that of a zona and a halala in the case of a common priest, as a divorced woman is forbidden by a separate prohibition for which he is liable to be flogged, so too the prohibition with regard to a divorced woman is distinct in the case of a high priest, and he will be liable to receive lashes for a separate prohibition if she was a halala as well. So the Gemara questions this statement. Well, this is obvious. Is the status of a high priest any lower than that of a common priest? Since this law applied to him when he was a common priest, it certainly applies to him when he becomes the high priest. His restrictions as a priest are not lessened when he becomes a high priest. Rather, he has even more stringencies attached to him when he's the high priest. So rather, teach as follows. Just as the prohibition with regard to a divorced woman is distinct from that of a zona and a halala in the case of a common priest, since he is liable to receive lashes for each of the prohibitions, so too a widow is distinct from a divorcee, right? Only the high priest is prohibited to marry a widow. A common priest can marry a widow. So the prohibition on marrying a widow is distinct from marrying a divorcee and a halala and a zona in the case of a high priest. And he is liable to receive lashes for each prohibition, despite the fact that they are stated in the same verse. So the Baraisa further asks, okay, so why is the prohibition with regard to a halala stated with regard to a high priest as she is forbidden to him even when he is a common priest? This repetition serves to teach that a halala results only from a prohibition addressed specifically to the priesthood. Why is the prohibition with regard to a zona stated with regard to a high priest as she is forbidden to him even when he is a common priest? It is stated here, zona, Leviticus 21:14, with regard to a high priest, and it is stated there, zona, Leviticus 21:7, with regard to a common priest. Just as here, in the case of a high priest who engages in sexual intercourse with a zona, his offspring are profaned in accordance with the verse, and he shall not profane his offspring, meaning his child is a halal. So too, there, in the case of a common priest who engages in intercourse with a zona, his offspring are profane. Right? So in other words, if a priest marries a woman who was previously rendered a zona, because, for example, she committed incest, his child by that woman is a priest, but he is also a halal who is disqualified from serving in the temple. Rav Ashi says, consequently, a priest who engages in intercourse with his sister renders her a zona, as he was forbidden to her as a brother, but he does not render her a halala, since her status as a zona does not result from a prohibition specific to the priesthood, but due to the prohibition on incest. If her brother or any other priest again engages in intercourse with her after she's been rendered a zona, then she becomes a halala as well, in accordance with the law pertaining to a priest who engages in intercourse with a zona. And that's how we see that a halal or halala status is only about matters pertaining to a priest. Being a zona doesn't automatically make you a halala, but when you're a zona and then you sleep with a priest, then you become a halala. Rav Yehuda says, and now we're well into 78a, Rav Yehuda says a high priest who engages in sexual intercourse with a widow is flogged 2 sets of lashes. 1 set due to transgressing the prohibition of a widow, or one divorced, or a halala, or a zona, these shall he not take. Leviticus 21:14. And another set of lashes due to transgressing the prohibition of, and he shall not profane his offspring. Since he profanes not only he shall not profane, since he profanes the woman with whom he engages in intercourse, right? He's rendered her a halala. The Gemara asks, and let him also be flogged with a 3rd set of lashes due to the complete phrase, he shall not profane his offspring. He's not only profaned her, he's profaned his offspring by that woman, because they are halalim. And the Gemara answers it is referring to a situation where he did not complete his act of intercourse. Since this act does not lead to pregnancy, he is not flogged for profaning his offspring, only for profaning her. Rava raises an objection against Rav Yehuda's statement from a Mishna in Makos 13a. A high priest who engages in sexual intercourse with a widow who was previously a divorcee is flogged due to 2 labels of prohibitions, right? A same woman is both a divorcee and a widow. She's prohibited to the high priest by 2 different prohibitions. If he sleeps with her, does he get 2 sets of lashes? Sounds like, according to this view, yes. What, is it not stating that he is flogged due to 2 labels and no more? This indicates that he receives only 1 flogging for each prohibition, but not 2. You might have thought he gets flogged not only for committing the transgression of sleeping with a widow and a divorcee, but also that from the fact that he profaned her and profanes the offspring if he has offspring by her. Now the Gemara rejects this. No, it means due to 2 labels for this, i.e. he is flogged 2 sets of lashes for engaging in intercourse with a widow, 1 for transgressing, he shall not take a widow, and 1 for transgressing, he shall not profane. And 2 labels for that, engaging in intercourse with a divorcee, and he shall not profane. So the Gemara asks, if so, the latter clause of that same Mishnah, if a priest engages in sexual intercourse with a divorcee who is also a yevama, who performed chalitza, right, that makes her like a divorcee legally, he is liable to receive lashes due to only 1 transgression. Since this woman who was a yavam and performed halutza, she is known as a halutza, since a halutza is not forbidden to a priest by Torah law, but rather only by rabbinic decree. This is contrary to the opinion of Rav Yehuda, that he should receive 2 sets of lashes for engaging in intercourse with a divorcee. So the Gemara answers, this is what the Mishnah is saying. He is liable to receive lashes due to only 1 act, that of engaging in intercourse with a divorcee. But actually, he's liable to receive 2 sets of lashes for his act of intercourse with a divorcee, since she is forbidden to him by 2 different labels. He does not receive an additional set of lashes on account of her being a halutza, as this prohibition is by rabbinic law rather than by Torah law. And the Gemara asks, and is a halutza forbidden to a priest only by rabbinic law? But isn't it taught in a baraisa? It states in the Torah, in the written Torah, that a priest may not marry a divorcee. I have derived only a divorcee. From where do I derive that a halutza is also prohibited? The verse states, and a woman divorced, Leviticus 21:7, with the additional conjunction of and, serving to include a halutza, that she is also considered to be a type of divorced woman. The Gemara rejects this. Even so, this prohibition is only by rabbinic law. The verse is mere support, but is not the true source of that law. Right? For those who are new here, if a man dies a Jewish man married to a Jewish woman dies before he has children, and he leaves both a widow and a brother. So the widow and the brother have an obligation to marry each other so that their first child can be considered the heir of the brother who died. They don't have to marry each other. They can instead choose to perform the halutza ceremony and then go their separate ways. Because they were bound to each other by this yibum obligation and they opted not to marry by performing halutza, she is considered under Jewish law like a divorced woman, and she cannot marry a priest because she is a halutza, but that is by rabbinic decree rather than written Torah law. Abaye says a priest who betrothed a woman forbidden to him is flogged, right? A priest who betrothed a woman, like for example, he didn't fully marry the divorcee, let's say he just became betrothed to her, and then realized he can't marry her. So, okay, gave her a get. He broke off the betrothal, but just the betrothal itself is a violation, and he's liable to be flogged for that. If he engage, now remember, flogging in all these cases, and really, we're doing a lot of cases here. This is not incidents that really happen in the real world so much. It's just there's this intersection of very interesting laws, and we're kind of working our way through. But just, again, if you're new, flogging is something that really only occurs when somebody is told, if you commit that sin, you will be flogged for it. The warning is given in front of two witnesses, and the person goes ahead and does it anyway immediately after receiving the warning. That's when flogging actually happens. But what we're really talking about here is whether an offense, a transgression, incurs liability for flogging, whether the flogging happens or not. Okay, so a priest who betrothed a woman forbidden to him is flogged. If he engaged in sexual intercourse with her, he is flogged additional lashes because the betrothal is a flogging offense, and sleeping with this woman who is prohibited to him is a flogging offense, and those are different prohibitions that he violated. The Gemara clarifies this. If he is betrothed, he is flogged due to transgressing the prohibition. He shall not take, for example, he shall not take a divorced woman to be his wife. If he also engaged in intercourse, he is flogged due to transgressing the prohibition of he shall not profane his offspring. Rava says if he engaged, or he shall not profane her because he has rendered her a halala since she is prohibited to him, she slept with him, now she's prohibited from marrying any other priest. Rava says if he engaged in intercourse, he is flogged. If he did not engage in intercourse, he is not flogged at all. Because it is written, shall he not take, and he shall not profane. Which Rav understands to mean, for what reason is he commanded not to take her, the one who is prohibited to him? It is so that he not profane her or the offspring. So Rava holds that he is not liable for taking, i.e. betrothing the woman, but only for engaging in intercourse with her, as this leads to the profanation. The Gemara notes, and although Abaye holds that the act of betrothal itself is forbidden, he concedes in the case of a Yisrael, right, a regular Jew, not a priest or a Levite, who remarries his divorcee. A priest cannot marry a divorced woman, even if she's his own wife that was legally married to her, and then they divorced, and then they decided to remarry. He can't do that. That's why a priest has to really think twice before divorcing his wife. So one who remarries his divorcee after she had been married to someone else in the interim. Now, even a regular Jew cannot remarry a woman after he divorces her if she was married to someone else in the interim. So now we're talking about two different prohibitions, right? So Abaye holds that the act of betrothal itself is forbidden. Even though he holds that, he concedes that in the case of a Yisrael who remarries his divorcee, after she had been married to someone else in the interim, that if he betrothed her without engaging in intercourse, he is not flogged. Why not? It is, as the Merciful One states in the Torah with regard to the prohibition, take her again to be his wife, which indicates that the act of betrothal is forbidden only if it leads to the intimacy of marriage, and there is no such intimacy here since he has not engaged in intercourse with her. And conversely, Rava concedes in the case of a high priest with a widow that if he engaged in sexual intercourse without betrothing her, he is flogged for the act of intercourse, as the Merciful One states in the Torah, and he shall not profane his offspring among his people. And he has profaned her with this act of intercourse. And they both concede in the case of the prohibition with regard to one who remarries his divorcee that if he engaged in intercourse with her without betrothing her, he is not flogged, because the Torah forbade them to reestablish their union only through the manner of taking, i.e. betrothal, but he did not prohibit the act of intercourse on its own. Now, they would be guilty for having an act of extramarital sex. That's a different transgression. But the prohibition that we're talking about here that's relevant here is that if a man and a woman are man and wife and they get divorced, they can remarry if he's not a priest. But if she goes and marries someone else in the interim, sleeps with her husband, then they divorce and wants to go back to her first husband, that is prohibited for them to marry. If they sleep together, that's a different kind of transgression, but they didn't violate the prohibition on remarrying after she had been with someone else. Now, the Mishna teaches that Rabbi Yehuda says the daughter of a male convert is like the daughter of a male halal. What's a male halal? The son of a union between, for example, a priest who married a divorcee. So he's a halal because he's a priest disqualified from serving in the holy temple when the temple is standing. And the daughter of a male convert is like the daughter of a male halal. She is prohibited from marrying into the priesthood. It is taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Yehuda says the daughter of a male convert is like the daughter of a male halal and is prohibited from marrying into the priesthood. And logic dictates that this is so, just as in the case of a halal who comes from a fit drop of semen, as both his parents are Jewish, his daughter is nevertheless unfit to marry into the priesthood because he became a halal. In the case of a convert who comes from an unfit drop, as he was born a Gentile, is it not logical that his daughter should be unfit to marry into the priesthood? But the Gemara says, no. What is notable about a halal? He is notable in that he is formed through a transgression. His father slept with a woman that was prohibited to him. Whereas the Gentile parents of a convert, they did not engage in any transgression. They're permitted to engage in sexual intercourse with each other. Therefore, the law of the daughter of a halal might be more stringent than the law of the daughter of a convert. And the Gemara responds, the case of a high priest who engages in intercourse with a widow shall prove that this aspect is not germane to the fitness of the offspring, since the formation of the high priest was not through a transgression, and yet his daughter is unfit to marry into the priesthood if she's his daughter by a widow that he was prohibited to marry, indicating that being formed through a transgression does not play a role in this matter. And the Gemara counters again. What is notable about a high priest who engages in intercourse with a widow? He's notable in that his act of intercourse is a transgression. This aspect is what leads to the stringent law that his daughter is unfit to marry into the priesthood. The Gemara responds, the case of a halal will prove that this aspect is not germane to the fitness of the offspring, as his daughter is unfit despite the fact that his act of intercourse does not involve a transgression. The halal, when he marries a regular Jewish woman, there's no transgression there, but his son remains a halal because he's the son of a halal, and his daughter is not permitted to marry a priest. And the derivation has reverted to its starting point. The aspect of this person, a halal, is not like the aspect of that person, a high priest, as with regard to each of them, there is a unique reason for the law to be stringent. Despite this, their common denominator is that they are unlike most of the Jewish people, most of the congregation, in that they both differ from Jews of unflawed lineage, either because their formation or their act of sexual intercourse involved a transgression, and their daughters are therefore disqualified from marrying into the priesthood. I will also bring the case of the convert, who is unlike most of the congregation, and therefore his daughter is also unfit to marry into the priesthood. But this argument is rejected. What is notable about their common denominator is that the reason they are not like most of the congregation includes an aspect of transgression, either with regard to their formation or to their active intercourse. Therefore, the law of the daughter of a convert cannot be derived from them. So the Gemara modifies its proof. Do not say that a high priest who engages in sexual intercourse with a widow will prove it. Rather, say that we can prove this law from the case of the first generation male Egyptian convert who married a first generation female Egyptian convert. Although their intercourse involves no transgression, their offspring are nevertheless disqualified from marrying into the priesthood, as Egyptians may enter into the congregation generally. Their daughter can't marry even a regular Jew who's not a priest until the third generation. Now, this proof is also rejected. What are you talking about? What's notable about a first generation Egyptian? He is notable that he's not fit to enter into the congregation at all, And that is why his offspring may not marry into the priesthood. That's just a subset of the rest of the Jewish people. And the Gemara responds that a halal will prove that this aspect is not germane to the fitness of the offspring, since his daughter is unfit to marry into the priesthood, although his offspring may enter into the congregation. And the derivation has reverted to its starting point. The law of the daughter of a convert cannot be derived from the case of the Egyptian alone, or from the case of the halal alone. The aspect of this person, an Egyptian convert, is not like the aspect of that person, a halal. With regard to each of them, there is a unique reason for the law to be stringent. Despite this, their common denominator is that they are unlike most of the congregation. Okay, that's not such a specific type of adjective about them, that they are unlike most of the congregation. In this case, in that they both differ from Jews of unflawed lineage, and their daughters are consequently unfit to marry into the priesthood. I will also bring the case of the convert, who is unlike most of the congregation, and that is why his daughter is unfit to marry into the priesthood. Right? Wrong, says the Gemara. What is notable about their common denominator is that they disqualify the daughter of a priest from marrying a priest through their active intercourse, which is not the case of a convert. And the Gemara explains, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that a convert also disqualifies the daughter of a priest from marrying a priest through his active intercourse, and he derives the law that the daughter of a convert is unfit to marry into the priesthood by means of an analogy derived from the common factor of the two sources, i.e. from this law of a halal and of an Egyptian. The Mishna states that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that the daughter of a convert, a male convert, and a Jewish woman is fit to marry into the priesthood. It is taught in a Baraisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says a female who converts when she's less than 3 years old is fit to marry into the priesthood, as it is stated after the war with Midian. Numbers 31:18. But all the female children who have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves, i.e. you may marry them. But wasn't Pinchas the priest with them? And yet the Torah permitted these women to all of them, which indicates that girls who are not of age when they convert are permitted even to priests? And how do the rabbis who hold that even a girl who converts at less than 3 years is unfit to marry into the priesthood, which is the law, interpret this verse? In their opinion, keep alive for yourselves means as slaves and as maidservants, but not for marriage. So the Gemara comments, and all of the Tanaim, the rabbis of the Mishna, who have a dispute with regard to the fitness of the daughter of a convert from marrying into the priesthood, expounded a single verse. It states with regard to priests, neither shall they take as their wives a widow, nor her that divorced, but they shall take virgins of the seed of the house of Israel. Ezekiel 44:22. Rabbi Yehuda holds a priest may marry a woman only if the entire seed is from those born to the Jewish people. Remember, daughters of converts themselves, of course, can marry any Jew. They're Jews like every other Jew. But the priesthood has this very elevated stringencies. Okay, so they can't marry a convert. Let's continue. So Rabbi Eliezer Yaakov holds of the seed of the house of Israel indicates that not all of the seed must come from the house of Israel. And even if part of the seed is from the house of Israel, that is sufficient to allow her to marry a priest. Rabbi Yosei, who holds that even the daughter of two converts is permitted to marry into the priesthood, holds that the seed of the house of Israel means one who was seeded, i.e. conceived in Israel. And the children of converts were conceived by Jewish parents. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who permits a female who converted at less than 3 years old to marry into the priesthood, holds that the phrase virgins of the seed of the house of Israel is referring to one whose hymen was formed as a Jew, i.e. a woman was already Jewish when her hymen completed its formation, which occurs at the age of 3. Rav Nachman said to Rava, now we're on page 78b, concerning this verse from Ezekiel, the first clause addresses a case with a high priest, as it states that he may not marry a widow. And the latter clause addresses a case with a common priest, as it states that he may marry a widow. Is that a reasonable manner in which to interpret a verse? And Rava said to him, yes. So Rav Nachman proceeded to ask, but can a verse be written in this way, addressing two different subjects without demarcation? And Rava said, yes. And there is a similar case, as it is written, and the lamp of God was not yet gone out, and Samuel, the prophet Shmuel, was laid down to sleep in the temple of the Lord. 1 Samuel 3:3. If read literally, this verse is puzzling. It apparently states that Samuel was lying in the sanctuary. but there is a right to sit in the courtyard of the temple only for the kings of the house of David alone. How then could Samuel be laid down to sleep in the temple? Rather, the verse should be understood as follows: and the lamp of God was not yet gone out in the temple of the Lord, and Samuel was laid down in his place outside the temple. Since the Gemara quoted the verse in Ezekiel, it proceeds to discuss it further. And the continuation of that verse states, and a widow who is the widow of a priest, they may take. Does this mean that a priest may marry the widow of another priest? Yes, but the widow of a Yisrael, a regular Jew, he may not marry? This is counter to the law that allows a priest to marry any widow. Only the high priest cannot marry a widow, but a common priest can marry any widow. Rather, this is what the verse is saying, and a widow who is the widow of a priest they may take, right? We're moving the comma, meaning that of the rest of the priests they may take. In other words, it is permitted for all other priests, common priests, as opposed to the high priest, to marry a widow. And that is also taught in Baraisa, of a priest they may take, right? Meaning the widow may take any priest as a husband, but not the high priest. Rabbi Yehuda states a different explanation of the verse: a widow who is the widow of one whose daughters are fit to marry into the priesthood they may take. The Gemara clarifies Rabbi Yehuda conforms to his line of reasoning above, as he says the daughter of a male convert is like the daughter of a male halal, and he ruled that anyone whose daughter you may marry, you may likewise marry his widow. Anyone whose daughter you may not marry, for example, a male convert, you may not marry his widow either. And the verse therefore states that a priest may marry the widow only of one whose daughter is permitted to marry into the priesthood. And finally, we're getting to the end of the discussion of Mishna number 4. The Mishna teaches that Rabbi Yosei says, even if there was a male convert who married a female convert, his daughter is fit to marry into the priesthood. Rav Hamnuna says in the name of Ula, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, and similarly, Rabbi Bar Chana says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei. And from the day the temple was destroyed, the priests were accustomed to act with a higher standard for themselves in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and they would marry the daughter of a convert only if one parent was born Jewish, right? So that it was permitted to them to marry the daughter of two converts, but they held themselves to this higher standard, meaning they followed the minority ruling of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rav Nachman says, Rav Huna said to me, if a priest comes to consult with us whether or not he should marry the daughter of two converts, we instruct him not to in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But if he went ahead and married her, we do not remove her from him in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, as the law follows the opinion of Rabbi Yosei. And that concludes Mishnah number 4 in its discussion. Here's Mishnah number 5 here in chapter 4. One who says, this son of mine is a mamzer. For example, if he claims that the son was born to one forbidden to him by a prohibition that carries the punishment of kares, he is not deemed credible to render his son a mamzer. And even if both of them, the father and the mother, admit that a fetus in her womb is a mamzer, they are not deemed credible. Rabbi Yehuda says they are deemed credible. Isn't that interesting? Like, who's not deemed credible if not the parents to say that their child is a mamzer? Why wouldn't we believe them? Well, we're going to read on, but remember that if the child really is deemed a definite mamzer, it's a terrible fate for the child that he's a Jew who can't marry other Jews unless they're mamzers. All right, let's see the Gemara on Mishnah number 5. What is the added novelty indicated by the phrase, and even if both of them? What is taught there that is not stated in the clause that taught that a father is not deemed credible to state that his son is a mamzer? And the Gemara answers, the Tana of our Mishnah is speaking utilizing the style of it is not necessary, meaning it is not necessary to state this law with regard to his claim when it is not clear to him, i.e. a father can never be sure that a child is his, right? A father can't know for sure because he doesn't know what the woman did when he was not around. Rather, the law is the same even with regard to her. When it is clear to her who the father is, she knows who the father is, and yet she is nevertheless not deemed credible to render her child a mamzer. And additionally, it is not necessary to state when the child has a presumption of unflawed lineage, as he was assumed to be of unflawed lineage before his parents came to testify, that they are not deemed credible. Rather, even in the case of a fetus, who does not have a presumption of unflawed lineage, as he has no status with regard to lineage until he is born, the parents are likewise not deemed credible. And the Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Yehuda, so after all this reading that we've done about mamzers, and sort of the tragic fate awaiting a mamzer, and who is a mamzer, and who's not a mamzer, what happens to mamzers, who can mamzers marry, etc., we see that it's actually very difficult for somebody to be deemed a mamzer. It's almost like if there's any possibility that he's not a mamzer, then he's not going to be a mamzer. It's like only in certain cases that are, so clear that he's a mamzer. And the Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Yehuda says they are deemed credible. That's Rabbi Yehuda, but he's the minority opinion. Now, this is as is taught in the Brisa, expounding the verse, he shall acknowledge the firstborn, Deuteronomy 21:17. The sages said, he, the father, shall acknowledge him to others. In other words, he is deemed credible to tell others that this is his firstborn. From here, Rabbi Yehuda said that a person is deemed credible to say, this is my firstborn son. And just as a person is deemed credible to say, this is my firstborn son, so too, a person would be deemed credible to say about his son, this is a son of a divorced woman, or this is the son of a halutza. And the rabbis say, as far as these latter claims are concerned, he is not deemed credible. He is deemed credible only to state which son is his firstborn, not to render his son a halal or a mamzer. Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak said to Rava, granted, according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is the meaning of that which is written, he shall acknowledge, as he derives from these words that a father is deemed credible to attest to the identity of his sons. But according to the rabbis in the Mishnah, why do I need the phrase, he shall acknowledge? And the Gemara answers, it is necessary for a case when he requires identification. If the identity of the firstborn is unknown, okay, so in such a case, the verse teaches that the father is deemed credible. And the Gemara asks, well, with regard to what law is it relevant that he can say which of my sons is the firstborn? We believe him about that, but not if he says that my son is a mamzer. Okay, so what's the situation where we would need to ask him which of your sons is the firstborn? Does it refer to the requirement by giving him a double portion, right? That the oldest gets a double portion of the inheritance, Deuteronomy 21:17. Isn't it obvious that he is deemed credible with regard to this law? Why do I need a verse to teach this? His claim is supported by the fact that he could have made a more advantageous claim, which is known as a migo, one of the rules of evidence, if he desired to give him a double portion as a gift while he was alive. Would the court not give it to him? Since the father could have given a double portion to the firstborn without having to testify and risk perjuring himself, since the father could have given a double portion to the firstborn without having to testify that he is his firstborn, it cannot be that the verse is teaching us that he is deemed credible with regard to the law that a firstborn receives a double portion of the inheritance. So the Gemara answers, no. The verse is referring to property that came into his possession at a later point, which he was unable to give to his son at the time that he came to testify. The verse teaches that the son, whom the father states is the firstborn, will receive a double portion even of that property that came into the father's possession later. I'm so close to done. Questions or comments? Please get them in now. And I will refresh that document. Okay, the Gemara asks, and according to Rabbi Meir, who says that a person can transfer an entity that has not yet come into the world, right, that you can dispose of, sell, grant, gift, something that does not yet exist. Only according to Rabbi Meir, who says that a person can transfer an entity that has not yet come into the world, which would mean that a person can give away his property even before it enters his possession. So according to that view, why do I need the verse? He shall acknowledge. And the Gemara answers, it is referring to a case where the property came into the father's possession when he was moribund, at which point he cannot transfer ownership of any of his property to others. It is with regard to such property that the verse states, he shall acknowledge, to teach that the son whom the father states is the firstborn will receive a double portion even of that property. Okay. Very interesting that we don't believe a father to render, in sworn testimony that his son is a mamzer. How does anyone become a mamzer? Well, it's not only up to the father. There could be other witnesses, even besides the mother and the father. There could be other witnesses to the situation. Let's say that there was an adultery and it was witnessed, and that's how we know that the offspring is a mamzer. then it's not the father whose sole testimony or even the parents whose sole testimony renders that person a mamzer. But whether a person ends up being a mamzer or not, we still have to learn the law of mamzers and who they can marry, etc. Okay. Questions or comments? I think I'm only getting one question from Bell. I'm sure I'm not the only one getting hot under the collar here. What about an incident like Absalom and his half-sister Tamar? Yes, no person is permitted to commit incest, but it seems that it is mainly women who get called names. Get called a zona. Right. Yes. I have no argument. But in this context, right, there's the term zona generally, and here what we were talking about is whether the woman is rendered disqualified to marry a priest. And it's not only what she did or didn't do that renders her disqualified to marry a priest. A divorced woman, she didn't do anything wrong, but just she's not permitted to marry a priest either. That's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Sunday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. I look forward to being with you then.